Welcome back. Moving on to our first segment for today. On the behalf of President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli is participating along with the Egyptian delegates in the Africa Climate Summit. And actually it is hosted by the Kenyan capital, Nairobi. Well, over the phone, we have with us Ms. Amira Sayed, and she's a journalist at the Egyptian Gazette. Hello.
Hello.
Good morning.
Good morning, dear. Thank you.
So, first of all, I'd like to shed the light on the importance of this summit taking place in Nairobi and the Egyptian participation.
So, actually, this year, this is the first edition of Africa Climate Summit. And it is happening like in Nairobi because today is the last day of the climate week, but yesterday was the last day of the summit. So we have two events in parallel, the Africa Climate Summit and the annual Africa Climate Week. So definitely like having a certain summit dedicated to the African continent is of paramount importance to highlight the priorities of the African continent. Especially this continent is still grappling with the numerous severe impacts of climate change. We have to take into consideration that though Africa is the least contributor to the global emission, the African emissions doesn't exceed 4% of the total emissions, yet it is the most vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. So it's time to shed light on the priorities of the African continent and also create momentum around these priorities. Actually, as I'm currently attending this summit, I have seen many international partners from across the world as well. So it's time also to lay foundation for constructive dialogue to move from words and vision into action. And this was the main theme of also COP27 that was held in Sharm el-Sheikh. And we have to mention that this summit in Nairobi builds on the success of COP27 outcomes. We have seen the historic decision to have the loss and damage fund. So now we are here in Africa make the best use of the outcomes of COP27. And here, definitely, I would like to refer to the valuable participation of the Egyptian high-level delegation that was chaired by the Prime Minister, Dr. Mustafa Madbouli, who delivered a very important speech and sent out clear messages regarding the increasing climate change impact. For example, the Prime Minister, Dr. Mustafa Madbouli, he referred to the drought waves in the Horn of Africa, the deadly hurricanes, and also the wildfires and the rising sea level, actually. He also, and we have to mention that he participated in this event on behalf of the Egyptian President, Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, and he also thanked the Kenyan President for hosting this event, and also as I mentioned, Dr. Madbouli said that this summit comes like a few months after Egypt's success in hosting the 27th edition of the Conference of Parties, COP27. So it will help somehow accelerate the implementation of climate-related projects on the ground, especially that this summit is held under the theme of driving green growth and also climate finance solution for Africa and the world. And we have to say also that there was a focus on a key message in this summit is to change the narrative around Africa. Instead of seeing Africa as only a victim of climate change, it can also be a leader in terms of addressing climate action. So there were many sessions tackling the opportunities to invest in green projects in Africa. We have to bear into consideration that Africa really it has great potential and it has many natural wealth that can be exploited in a positive way to address climate change. The Egyptian delegation, back to the participation of the Egyptian delegation, there was also valuable participation by the Irrigation Minister, Dr. Hani Swilam, who is currently also the president of the African Minister of Water, the AMCAO. He also highlighted the climate challenges facing Egypt, especially in the Nile Delta area, and how Egypt is trying to adapt to all these challenges resources. For example, he said that in the water sector, like Egypt invested around 10 billion US dollars over the last 5 years in order to switch modern irrigation, to adopt more adaptation measures in terms of lining canals. All these measures were taken in order to address the severe impacts of climate change, for example, on the water security. In addition to that, also we have seen also a valuable participation by the Environment Minister, Dr. Yasmin Fuad, who focused on Egypt's efforts to move, to push forward the adaptation strategy, and she held many bilateral meetings, for example, with the UAE minister as well, as we are now ahead of COP28. So let us say that this historic event, which is the first ever climate summit in Africa, it was, we can say, a result of the success of COP27, because also COP27 managed to achieve the long-awaited dream for the African continent, which is to have a fund for loss and damages.
Well, it is of great importance also to work hard on the idea of the transition into green economy in the African continent, and also to work on the international community to follow or to abide by the legitimate demands of the continent, right?
Exactly, and actually, this part related to the climate finance was at the core of the messages that Prime Minister Dr. Mustafa Madbouli delivered in the summit. He said that financing is still the main impediment facing Africa and developing countries in general to implement their plans. So this requires a collective action, and also he shed light on the importance of reconsidering the available financing tools and how to offer soft loans and grants to accelerate such transition. In addition to how to say restructuring and reconsidering the standards of investment flow into Africa to get its fair share of finance. So, as I mentioned, that now if we are talking about green transition, we cannot achieve the green transition without having the financial resources. And when we are talking about providing financial support or financial resources, we need it in a way that doesn't exacerbate the burdens of debts in Africa. So we need more collaboration, more investment projects, and because Africa already has great potential, so it's time to switch from the concept that Africa now just grants or aids into real investment, real collaboration, thanks to its valuable resources. And in this regard, Egypt has a successful experience in switching to green transition that all African countries are looking up to. For example, in renewable energy, we have many projects. If we are talking about, for example, the solar power plant Bimban, which is the biggest in Africa and the Middle East, this is a step forward. We have many initiatives in Egypt as well to have sustainable transport and eco-friendly transportation. So actually, as I said, Egypt's participation itself was valuable as it was the host of COP27, and also because it has a successful experience that can be a reference for all African countries.
Right, Ms. Amira Sayed, journalist in the Egyptian Gazette. Thank you very much for joining us. And moving on to a quick break, then we will be back with more on The Breakfast Show.